I never expected my hobby of keeping bees would turn into a full-blown neighborhood war. But that's exactly what happened when Patricia Dearborn became president of our homeowners association in Riverside, California. I'm Owen Michaels, and I've been keeping bees in my backyard for 3 years. My property sits on a half-acre lot in the Oakwood Springs development, and when I first moved in, I checked every single HOA rule. Nowhere did it mention anything about bees. The closest restriction was about livestock, and according to California law, bees aren't livestock. I even consulted with a lawyer before installing my first 2 hives. I did everything by the book. My bees were quiet, productive, and honestly, they were therapeutic. After my divorce 2 years ago, those little buzzing insects gave me purpose. I'd spend hours watching them work, harvesting honey, learning about their complex society. My backyard became a small paradise with the hives positioned near my fence line, far from any neighboring windows or gathering areas. The neighborhood actually benefited from my bees. Everyone's gardens flourished. Mrs. Chen, 3 houses down, had the best tomatoes she'd grown in 20 years. The Rodriguez family's fruit trees produced more apples and peaches than ever before. Even Patricia's own garden, which she bragged about constantly at neighborhood gatherings, had become the envy of our entire subdivision. Everything was fine until Patricia decided she needed to make her mark as HOA president. It was a Tuesday morning in late April when my doorbell rang. I was working from home, finishing up a project proposal for my consulting business, when I heard the aggressive buzzing of the doorbell. Not like my bees. This was impatient, demanding. I opened the door to find Patricia standing there with her phone out, recording me. "Yes?" I asked, immediately wary. Patricia was in her early 50s, with blonde hair that she obviously spent too much money maintaining, and she wore athleisure clothes that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. "Owen Michaels, I'm here in my official capacity as HOA president to inform you that you're in violation of our community standards." "What violation?" "Your bees. They need to be removed immediately." I actually laughed. "Patricia, there's no rule against bees." I checked extensively before I installed the hives. "Well, there is now." She thrust a piece of paper at me. "Emergency HOA meeting last night. We voted on new regulations regarding dangerous insects and pests." I took the paper and scanned it. Sure enough, there was freshly printed text about prohibiting the keeping of bees, wasps, or other stinging insects on residential properties within the Oakwood Springs community. "This wasn't announced," I said. "HOA meetings require notice to all residents." "It was an emergency meeting." The bylaws allow for emergency sessions with notice to board members only. "What emergency? My bees have been here for 3 years. Patricia's expression turned smug. "Mrs. Fletcher reported that she saw a bee near her property and she's allergic. That constitutes an immediate health and safety concern." I knew Mrs. Fletcher. She was 83 and could barely make it to her mailbox. Her house was 4 properties away from mine. "Did you verify her allergy?" "That's not relevant. The rule is passed. You have 14 days to remove the bees or face fines of $500 per day per violation." "Per hive, per bee." I stared at her. "That's insane. I have approximately 60,000 bees across 3 hives. Then I suggest you work quickly." She turned on her designer sneakers and walked away. I immediately called my lawyer, David Chen, who happened to be Mrs. Chen's son. He listened to my explanation and asked me to send over the HOA notice. "This is problematic," he said after reviewing it. "They do have the right to hold emergency meetings, but the application is questionable. However, fighting it could take months and cost thousands. How attached are you to the bees?" Very. But it's not just that. Patricia is clearly abusing her authority. I agree, but proving that is different from defending your rights in court. Let me look into California's beekeeping laws and the HOA's specific bylaws. Don't do anything yet. The next few days were tense. I continued caring for my bees while David researched. Meanwhile, I noticed Patricia had started a campaign in the neighborhood. She posted in our community Facebook group about the dangerous situation the bees created. She sent out a newsletter with photos of bee stings and warning signs about bee attacks. Most of my neighbors didn't buy it. Several people posted supportive comments, including Mrs. Chen, who pointed out that her garden had never been better since I installed the hives. Carlos Rodriguez mentioned his fruit trees. Even young Jenny Wilson, a high school student, posted about how she'd been doing a science project on local pollinators, and my bees had been a perfect subject for photography and observation. But Patricia was relentless. She organized a petition, going door to door with printed materials about bee attack statistics. She conveniently left out that most of those statistics involved African killer bees, not the gentle Italian honey bees I kept. By the following Monday, David called me with mixed news. Legally, you have a case, he said. California has right to farm laws that protect agricultural activities, and beekeeping is classified as agriculture. However, HOA covenants can supersede those in some cases. The real issue is whether their emergency meeting was legitimate. I found something interesting in your HOA's bylaws. Emergency meetings can only be called for genuine emergencies like natural disasters, immediate safety hazards, or financial crises. Someone claiming they saw a bee doesn't qualify. So what do? We challenge the validity of the meeting. I'll draft a letter to the HOA board. If they don't respond appropriately, we file an injunction. But Owen, this could get expensive and messy. I don't care. This is about principle now. David sent the letter that afternoon. It detailed the legal issues with the emergency meeting, cited California's beekeeping protection laws, and demanded the HOA rescind the new rule. He gave them 5 business days to respond. Patricia's response came in less than 24 hours, and it wasn't through official channels. She posted in the Facebook group, Owen Michaels has hired a lawyer to threaten our HOA board with legal action. He cares more about his bugs than about the safety of his neighbors. This is the kind of selfish behavior that destroys communities. The comments section exploded. Some people supported her. Others called her out for being manipulative. The thread had to be locked after reaching over 200 comments. That evening, someone threw a rock through my front window. Attached was a note, "Get rid of the bees or we'll get rid of them for you." I called the police. They took a report, but the officer was honest with me. Unless you have security cameras that caught who did it, these cases are hard to solve. I'd recommend installing cameras and being careful. I took his advice. The next day, I installed a complete security system with cameras covering my entire property, especially focused on the backyard where the hives were located. Good thing I did. 3 nights later, at 2 in the morning, my security system's motion alerts went off on my phone. I pulled up the camera feed and saw 2 figures in dark clothes climbing over my back fence. I dialed 911 immediately while watching the feed. The figures approached my beehives with what looked like baseball bats. "Don't go outside," the dispatcher told me. "Officers are on the way." I watched helplessly as the 2 people raised their bats, but before they could strike the hives, my backyard flooded with light. I'd set the motion sensors to trigger bright security lights, and the sudden illumination startled them. They ran back toward the fence. Police arrived within minutes, but the intruders were gone. However, My cameras had captured clear footage of them approaching, even if I couldn't make out their faces under their dark hoods and masks. The responding officer reviewed the footage. "This is attempted vandalism and potentially trespassing with intent to commit a crime. We'll investigate. Can you think of anyone who might want to do this? I'm having a dispute with my HOA president about the beehives." The officer's expression shifted. "Patricia Dearborn. You know her." "We've responded to calls involving HOA disputes in this neighborhood before. She's been involved in several. Nothing we could ever prove, but there's been a pattern." He took a copy of my security footage and promised to investigate. The next morning, Patricia showed up at my door again, this time without her phone out. "I heard about the incident last night," she said. Her tone was different, less aggressive. "I want you to know that the HOA board doesn't condone vandalism or threats. But you condone pushing through illegal rules to harass people. The rule isn't illegal," my lawyer disagrees. "We're prepared to file an injunction." Her jaw tightened. "Owen, why are you being so difficult? They're just bees. You can keep bees somewhere else." "This is my property. I'm not breaking any laws. You're the one who manufactured a crisis to push through a rule that targets me specifically. It's not personal." "Really? Can you name any other resident who keeps bees?" She didn't answer. "That's what I thought. This is harassment, Patricia. And if anything happens to my bees or my property, I'll hold you personally responsible." "Are you threatening me?" "I'm promising you that I have cameras, lawyers, and documentation of everything. If you want to play games, I'll play them better." She left without another word, but I could see the anger in her posture. The HOA's official response to David's letter came the next day. They refused to rescind the rule, claiming it was properly enacted and within their authority. They also extended my deadline to remove the bees by another 30 days, which David said was probably their attempt to appear reasonable before a judge. "We file the injunction," I told him. David agreed and started the paperwork. Meanwhile, spring was turning into early summer, and something strange started happening in the neighborhood. The gardens that had been flourishing began to decline. Mrs. Chen's tomatoes weren't setting fruit like they had been. The Rodriguez family's trees had fewer apples forming. And most notably, Patricia's prize garden, which she'd posted about constantly on social media, started struggling. Her roses weren't blooming as abundantly. Her vegetable garden looked sparse. I noticed her outside frequently, fussing over her plants, adding fertilizers, adjusting her watering schedule. What she hadn't realized was that my bees had been pollinating her garden all this time. I kept this observation to myself. Let her figure it out. The injunction hearing was scheduled for mid-June. David was confident we had a strong case. He documented every procedural violation by the HOA, gathered evidence about California's beekeeping protections, and even found 3 other HOA cases where similar emergency meetings had been ruled invalid. But Patricia wasn't going quietly. She doubled down on her campaign, sending out another newsletter with photos of bee attack victims and statistics about bee sting deaths. She organized what she called a community safety forum at the neighborhood clubhouse. I decided to attend. About 40 residents showed up, which was pretty good turnout for our subdivision of 200 homes. Patricia had a PowerPoint presentation ready, full of alarming images and dire warnings. "Bee attacks are on the rise across California," she began. "These insects may seem harmless, but they can swarm. They can attack without provocation, and for those with allergies, they can be deadly. Owen Michaels has chosen to keep 3 hives containing tens of thousands of bees in a residential neighborhood where children play and families live." Mrs. Chen raised her hand. "I'd like to speak." Patricia looked annoyed but couldn't refuse. Go ahead. I've lived in this neighborhood for 30 years. Before Owen installed his beehives, my garden produced moderately. Since he installed them, I've had the best harvests of my life. Bees are pollinators. They help our gardens, our trees, our entire ecosystem. I haven't seen any aggressive behavior from them. Several people murmured in agreement. Carlos Rodriguez stood up. My fruit trees have tripled their production since Owen got bees. My kids play in the backyard all the time and they've never been stung. I think this is an overreaction. Your children are lucky, Patricia said sharply. But one sting to the wrong person could mean a lawsuit against our entire HOA. We have liability to consider. Liability for what? I spoke up from the back of the room. I carry insurance for the bees. My property is maintained according to all local ordinances. The bees aren't a nuisance. They don't bother anyone. This isn't about safety, Patricia. This is about you exerting control. That's not true. Then explain why you called an emergency meeting without properly notifying residents. Explain why this rule specifically targets beekeeping when we have neighbors with actual violations like unpermitted sheds and commercial vehicles parked on the street. Those violations get ignored, but you're demanding $500 per day per bee. That's not safety. That's persecution. The room erupted in conversation. People were arguing with each other, some supporting me, others worried about bee attacks. The meeting devolved into chaos, and Patricia eventually gave up trying to control it. As people filed out, several neighbors approached me to offer support. Jenny Wilson, the high school student, asked if she could interview me for her school newspaper about the situation. Sure, I said. Maybe some public attention will help. Patricia overheard this. You're going to the media. It's a school newspaper, Patricia. But yes, I'm happy to talk about how HOA boards can abuse their power. Her face flushed red. You're going to regret this. Is that a threat? It's a fact. 2 days later, my bees were poisoned. I discovered it in the morning when I went to check the hives. Dead bees covered the ground around all 3 hives, thousands of them. The distinctive smell of pesticide hung in the air. I was devastated. These weren't just insects to me. They were living creatures I'd cared for, studied, and appreciated. I'd named the hives. I'd monitored the queens. I'd harvested honey that I shared with neighbors. Now they were dying and someone had deliberately killed them. I called the police immediately. The same officer who'd responded to the attempted vandalism came out. This is criminal mischief at minimum, he said, examining the scene. Possibly animal cruelty, depending on how California law classifies bees. We'll need to get samples analyzed to determine what poison was used. Check my security cameras. We reviewed the footage together. At 4 in the morning, a single figure had approached my hives wearing a full bodysuit and carrying a spray tank. They'd systematically sprayed each hive before leaving. The camera angle didn't capture their face clearly, but it recorded their car. A silver Lexus SUV parked 2 houses down. That's Patricia Dearborn's car, the officer said. Can you prove it? The license plate is visible. That's enough for us to question her. Within hours, detectives were at Patricia's house. I watched from my window as she answered the door, her expression shifting from confusion to alarm when they asked her about the incident. She denied everything, of course. Claimed her car had been in her garage all night. Said she would never do such a thing, but the detectives got a search warrant. In Patricia's garage, they found a spray tank with traces of pesticide residue. They also found the protective suit in her trash can. She was arrested that evening for criminal mischief, trespassing, and vandalism. The bail was set at $10,000. The neighborhood Facebook group went insane. Some people defended Patricia, claiming she was being framed. Others celebrated her arrest. The HOA board issued a statement saying Patricia had been suspended from her duties pending the outcome of the criminal case. My bees were mostly dead, but I managed to save one hive that had received less exposure to the poison. The other two were total losses. I was heartbroken, but also angry. David advised me that we now had grounds for a civil lawsuit in addition to our injunction case. She destroyed your property, caused emotional distress, and did it with clear malicious intent, he said. You can sue for the value of the bees, the cost of replacement, and punitive damages. How much are we talking? Each colony is worth between $300 to $500. You lost two, so that's about $1,000. But with the harassment, the emotional distress, and the clear malice, you could seek $10,000 to $20,000 in total damages. A judge might award even more given the circumstances. Do it. The criminal case moved forward. Patricia hired a defense attorney who argued that there was no proof she was the person in the suit, that the car could have been driven by someone else, and that the pesticide in suit could have been planted. But the prosecution had the security footage showing someone of Patricia's exact height and build. They had her car's GPS data, which her Lexus automatically tracked, showing it had been driven to my street at 4 in the morning. And they had her motive, the well-documented HOA dispute. In July, Patricia pleaded no contest to the charges. She was sentenced to 6 months probation, 200 hours of community service, and ordered to pay restitution for the bees. She also had to resign from the HOA board. Our civil case settled out of court. Patricia's homeowner's insurance paid $15,000 rather than go to trial. But the story doesn't end there. Remember Patricia's garden. By mid-July, it was a disaster. Her roses had barely bloomed. Her vegetables were stunted. Her prized sunflowers that she'd posted about every summer were sparse and weak. She tried everything. Different fertilizers, new soil, adjusted watering schedules, even hiring a professional gardener. Nothing worked. Meanwhile, I'd replaced my 2 lost hives. My surviving hive had actually grown stronger, and I'd split it to create 2 new colonies. By August, I was back to 3 healthy hives, and the neighborhood garden started recovering. Mrs. Chen's late summer tomatoes came in strong. The Rodriguez family's second fruit bloom was productive. Even properties that hadn't been as directly affected saw improvements, everywhere except Patricia's house. One evening in late August, my doorbell rang. I opened it to find Patricia standing there. She looked different, tired, humbled. "Owen, I need to talk to you. I have cameras recording this. I know, I'm not here to cause trouble, I'm here to apologize." I was genuinely surprised. "Okay, can I come in?" I hesitated, then stepped onto my porch instead, leaving the door cracked. "We can talk here." She took a deep breath. I was wrong. About everything. The bees, the HOA rule, the way I treated you, and the poisoning. I don't know what I was thinking. I was so focused on being right, on maintaining control, that I lost perspective completely. Why? Honestly, my life is kind of a mess. My husband and I are separated. My kids don't talk to me much. The HOA president position was the one place where I felt important, where I had authority. When you challenged me, it felt like losing the last thing I had control over. That's not an excuse. I know what I did was terrible, but that's the truth. Patricia, you killed thousands of living creatures because of a power trip. You harassed me for months. You tried to intimidate me into giving up something I loved. I know. Her eyes were actually tearing up. I've been in therapy since the arrest. My therapist has helped me see how toxic my behavior was. I'm trying to be better. Good, you should be. There's something else. She looked embarrassed. My garden has been dying all summer. I hired 3 different gardeners and they all said the same thing: I don't have enough pollinators. Your bees were pollinating my plants, and now that they're gone, or now that I tried to make them gone, my garden is suffering. I couldn't help it. I laughed, not meanly but at the irony of it. I'm glad you figured it out. I was wondering if you'd consider. I mean, I know I have no right to ask, but could your bees maybe help my garden again? Patricia, bees go where they want. If your flowers are attractive to them, they'll visit. I don't control their flight patterns. But your hives are positioned away from my property now. I noticed you moved them to the far corner of your yard. That's for their protection. After someone poisoned them, she flinched. Right, of course. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have asked. But, I continued, bees can fly up to 5 miles to forage. If your garden has flowers they like, they'll come. Plant some bee-friendly flowers. Lavender, sunflowers, wildflowers. Stop using pesticides. Create an environment that attracts them. Would you help me? I'll pay you for your time, or donate to a charity, or whatever you want. I thought about it. Part of me wanted to tell her to figure it out herself. But another part, the part that loved bees and wanted to educate people about them, saw an opportunity. I'll help you, but not for money. You're going to volunteer at a local environmental nonprofit. There's a group called Riverside Pollinator Project that does education about bees and other pollinators. You'll volunteer there for 100 hours beyond your court-ordered community service. Done. And you're going to issue a formal apology to the neighborhood explaining what you learned about the importance of pollinators and admitting that you were wrong about the HOA rule. She hesitated only a moment. Okay. And you'll support my motion to the HOA to add protective language to the bylaws preventing future boards from banning beekeeping. Yes. Over the next few weeks, Patricia actually followed through. She wrote and posted a detailed apology in the neighborhood newsletter and Facebook group. She admitted she'd acted out of ignorance and personal issues rather than genuine safety concerns. She explained what she'd learned about bees as pollinators and their importance to gardens and agriculture. She started volunteering at the Pollinator Project, and according to their director, she was actually taking it seriously, learning about native bees, butterflies, and other insects that help our ecosystem. I helped her redesign her garden with pollinator-friendly plants. We removed the pesticide-heavy ornamentals she'd been using and replaced them with native California flowers, herbs, and vegetables that attracted bees naturally. By September, her garden was recovering. My bees visited regularly, along with native bees, butterflies, and other pollinators. Her roses bloomed again. Her vegetables grew strong and healthy. The HOA board, now under new leadership, formally rescinded the bee ban. They also implemented new rules requiring full resident notification for any meeting that would change covenants, eliminating the emergency meeting loophole Patricia had exploited. My injunction case became moot since the rule was rescinded, so we dropped it. The legal fees had been covered by the settlement money anyway. Jenny Wilson's article about the situation was published not just in her school newspaper, but was picked up by the local Riverside press enterprise. It became a popular piece about HOA overreach and the importance of urban beekeeping. I did an interview with them, and the attention actually led to 3 other families in the neighborhood starting their own hives. Mrs. Chen's son David, my lawyer, told me that the case had become a reference point for other HOA disputes in California. Several attorneys had contacted him about using our documentation and strategy for similar cases. By October, things had settled into a comfortable routine. My bees were thriving in the autumn weather. I'd harvested a good amount of honey that I shared with neighbors, including Patricia, who'd actually teared up when I gave her a jar. "I don't deserve this," she said. "It's honey, Patricia, not forgiveness. But it's a start." She'd continued therapy and her volunteer work. She'd even started a blog about her journey from HOA tyrant to bee advocate. Her words, not mine. It was surprisingly popular, with other former HOA board members reaching out to share their own stories of letting power go to their heads. Her husband came back. They were trying to work things out, attending couples counseling together. I saw them working in her garden one weekend, and they actually looked happy. In November, the neighborhood held its annual meeting to elect new HOA board members. Patricia didn't run, but she attended and spoke during the open comment period. "I want to thank Owen Michaels," she said, her voice steady. "Not for forgiving me because I'm not sure I deserve that yet, but for showing me that admitting you're wrong doesn't make you weak. It makes you honest. I abused my authority as president. I let personal problems turn me into someone I'm ashamed of. If I'd listened, if I'd learned about bees before attacking them, if I'd acted with humility instead of ego, none of the bad things would have happened. I hope the new board will lead with curiosity and community, rather than control." The new board president, Carlos Rodriguez, thanked her and assured everyone that they'd be working to create more transparency and community input in all decisions. As winter approached, I prepared my hives for the cooler months. California winters are mild, but the bees still needed care and monitoring. I'd sit in my backyard on clear afternoons, watching the reduced activity around the hives, reading books about advanced beekeeping techniques, planning for spring. My divorce had left me feeling purposeless and disconnected. The bees had given me back a sense of meaning. The battle with Patricia had tested my resolve, but it had also shown me that standing up for what matters, even when it's difficult, is worth it. Sometimes I'd see Patricia working in her garden and we'd wave to each other. Not quite friends, but no longer enemies. She was a person who'd made terrible choices and was genuinely trying to make amends. That was more than a lot of people could say. In December, the Pollinator Project asked if I'd be willing to speak at schools about beekeeping and pollinator conservation. Patricia had recommended me during one of her volunteer sessions. I agreed, and it opened up a whole new avenue of community involvement I hadn't anticipated. My first presentation was at Jenny Wilson's high school. She introduced me, and I talked about how I got started with beekeeping, the benefits of bees to agriculture and gardens, and how to safely coexist with these essential insects. The students asked great questions, and several expressed interest in starting their own hives someday. After the presentation, a teacher approached me. "Have you considered expanding this? Maybe offering workshops for adults?" I hadn't, but the idea appealed to me. By January, I was running monthly beekeeping workshops through the Pollinator Project. Patricia attended the first one and helped set up chairs and materials. She'd become genuinely passionate about pollinator education. "I wasted so much time being afraid of something I didn't understand," she told the class during a Q and a session. "Bees are incredible creatures. I destroyed Owen's hives out of ignorance and spite, and it's one of my biggest regrets. Learn from my mistake. Ask questions. Seek understanding before judgment." Her honesty was powerful. Several attendees came up afterward to thank her for sharing her story. The criminal charges remained on her record, but her probation officer was impressed with her community service work and her genuine rehabilitation. She'd completed far more hours than required and had become a valuable volunteer at multiple organizations. By spring, my 3 hives had survived the winter and were thriving. I split them again, creating 6 hives total. Other beekeepers in the neighborhood were also expanding their operations. Our little subdivision had become known in Riverside as a pollinator-friendly community. The gardens that year were spectacular. Mrs. Chen's tomatoes were legendary. The Rodriguez orchard produced so much fruit they had to give away boxes to neighbors. And Patricia's garden, now fully redesigned with native plants and pollinator-friendly flowers, was featured in a local gardening magazine. She asked if I'd be willing to be interviewed with her for the article. I agreed, and we told the story honestly, the conflict, the poisoning, the legal consequences, and the ultimate reconciliation and education. Sometimes, Patricia said in the interview, you have to lose something precious to understand its value. I tried to take away Owen's bees because I was focused on control. What I didn't realize was that those bees were benefiting everyone, including me, especially me. When they were gone, I saw exactly what I'd lost, not just pollination, but the beauty of a natural system working in harmony. Owen didn't just teach me about bees. He taught me about community, humility, and second chances. The article went viral locally and got picked up by a few national gardening blogs. I started getting emails from people across the country dealing with similar HOA conflicts. I couldn't help them all legally, but I could share our story and the strategies that worked for us. David put together a guide for beekeepers facing HOA opposition, using our case as a template. It included information about state beekeeping protections, HOA legal limits, and strategies for community education. Several beekeeping associations distributed it. By summer, nearly a year after the poisoning incident, things had come full circle. I had healthy hives, a growing community education program, and a neighborhood that appreciated and protected its pollinators. Patricia had completed her probation successfully. Her marriage was stable. She'd found purpose in volunteer work and advocacy. She'd even started taking beekeeping classes herself, though she admitted she wasn't ready to keep her own hives yet. Maybe someday, she said, when I've earned the right to care for them. You've done the work, Patricia. If you want to keep bees, you should. You really think so? I do. You've learned and changed. That's what matters. In August, almost exactly a year after our civil case settled, Patricia installed 2 hives in her backyard. I helped her get started, teaching her about hive management, seasonal care, and bee behavior. She was a dedicated student, taking notes, asking questions, treating the bees with genuine respect. Her first honey harvest in October was small but successful. She gave jars to all our neighbors with a note attached. From Patricia's bees, thank you for your patience with my growth. It was corny, but it was sincere. The neighborhood had transformed. What had been a typical suburban development with manicured lawns and conventional landscaping was now a thriving pollinator habitat. Multiple families kept bees. Gardens were designed with native plants. People talked about butterfly species and native bee identification. The HOA even created a sustainability committee that Patricia co-chaired with Mrs. Chen. They developed guidelines for pollinator-friendly landscaping and offered rebates for residents who converted traditional lawns to native plant gardens. In November, I received an award from the Riverside County Agricultural Extension for outstanding contribution to urban agriculture. Patricia attended the ceremony with her husband. She cheered when they called my name. Afterward, she approached me with something in her hands. It was a frame containing a photo of a bee on one of her sunflowers, beautifully captured in perfect lighting. I took this in my garden last month, she said. I wanted you to have it as a thank you, and as a reminder that good can come from bad situations if people are willing to learn and grow. I accepted it gratefully. Thank you, Patricia. No, thank you. You could have destroyed me. Instead, you educated me. That says a lot about your character. As winter came again, I reflected on everything that had happened. 2 years prior, I'd installed beehives as a personal hobby after a difficult divorce. I'd never imagined those hives would lead to legal battles, criminal charges, neighborhood controversy, and ultimately, community transformation. Patricia had been a villain in the story, no doubt. She'd abused her authority, harassed me, and destroyed my property. But she'd also faced consequences, taken responsibility, and genuinely changed. That was more than many people in similar positions ever did. The bees had taught us all something valuable. They taught me about standing firm for what matters. They taught Patricia about humility and the importance of understanding before acting. They taught our neighborhood about interconnectedness and the value of natural systems. My 6 hives were tucked in for winter now, the bees clustered inside staying warm. Come spring, they'd emerge and begin their work again, pollinating gardens, producing honey, and sustaining the ecosystem we'd all learned to value and protect. I sat in my backyard on a cool December afternoon, watching the quiet hives, and felt genuine contentment. The war was over. The wounds had healed, and something beautiful had grown from the wreckage. Sometimes that's how life works. You face conflict, endure hardship, stand your ground, and if you're lucky, everyone comes out better on the other side. Not unchanged, but improved. Not without scars, but wiser. My phone buzzed with a text from Patricia. She was organizing a neighborhood honey tasting event for the spring and wanted to know if I'd help coordinate it. I smiled and typed back a confirmation. The bees had brought us full circle, from conflict to cooperation, from ignorance to education, from division to community. They were just insects following their nature, but they taught us all how to be better humans, and that was worth every difficult moment along the way.